Today we're going to learn how to tell time to the hour and half hour. First we have the analog clock, which is this clock right here, and then we are also going to talk about the digital clock. The analog clock is circle shaped. Where do you usually see an analog clock? I usually see an analog clock at school, in my house, maybe you see it in the lunchroom. So you see this clock pretty much everywhere. Now one cool thing about the analog clock is that it goes around in a circle with the numbers 1 through 12. Well, between each number, there's little tiny tick marks. Okay? And these tick marks are the minutes in the clock, but we're just going to learn about the hours and the half hours. So the long hand tells us our minutes, okay? Now our long hand's pointing to 0, which means there's 0 minutes. Our shorthand always tells us the hour. Well, our shorthand's pointing to 11 and there's 0 minutes. So we call this 11 o'clock. Now, if the long hand was pointing to the 6 and the shorthand was pointing that way, between 11 and 12, that is 11:30 because the long hand is pointing to the 30-minute mark or the halfway mark of the clock, and the shorthand is between the 11 and the 12. Now the shorthand is our hour hand, remember that. Our hour hand is going to be in between two numbers when the minute hand has already been halfway around the clock. The hour hand's always going to be halfway, just like the minute hand's halfway. So we're always talking about the number that the hour hand has already passed. So in this case, the hour hand has already passed 11 because it's after 11. So it is 11:30. This is a skip counting song. It makes it easier to count by fives around the clock. The digital clock is easier to tell time on. We usually find a digital clock on an alarm clock, maybe on your parents' phone, in the kitchen, or in the car. So the way we tell time on this is first knowing that this is the hour and these are the minutes. Okay, so in this case, the time is 11 o'clock. And we spell that 11 o'clock. Let's try these practice problems. So the directions say, tell what time it is on the digital or analog clock. So for number 1, this is a digital clock. So the hours is 1 and the minutes is 30. So this is 1:30. Number 2, this is an analog clock, and the long hand's pointing to 12 and the short hand's pointing to 3. Well, the shorthand tells us the hour, so the hour is 3, and the long hand's pointing to 12, and 12 means there are 0 minutes, so it is 3 o'clock. Then for number 3, this is another digital clock, and the hour here is 7, and the minutes are 0, so it is 7 o'clock. And for number 4, this is an analog clock. The long hand's pointing to 6, and the short hand is between the 8 and 9. So the long hand, when it's pointing to 6, that means that it is halfway. So it is 30. Okay, and the shorthand's between the 8 and 9. And always remember that if the shorthand is between two numbers, it is always the lower number. So 8 is lower than 9. It's a smaller number than 9, so we always go with the smaller number, okay? Unless the shorthand is between the 12 and the 1. That's when we would say that it is 12 instead of 1. That's the only exception, okay? So this is 8:30. Sometimes when we're first learning how to tell time on an analog clock, we sometimes forget the difference between the long hand and the short hand. So an easy practice way is to use two different colors. So for these examples, the long hand is already done for us, or the minute hand, and those arrows are in blue. We're going to use a red pen to show the hour hand or the shorthand. So for number 1, this says 9 o'clock. So if we're doing the hour hand, we're drawing the shorthand, and we're going to draw it in red, and we're going to point it to 9 because it's 9 o'clock. For number 2, we need to write 6:30. So our longhand's already done for us, pointing to the 30-minute mark on the clock, which is the 6. And then our hour hand is going to be between the 6 and the 7, okay? Because remember, the hour hand is always about the lower number, okay? No matter where it's pointing, unless it is between the 12 and the 1. And then for number 3, we have 4:30. So again, our minute hand is pointing to the 6 because that's our halfway mark. And we are going to put the hour hand between the 4 and the 5 because the hour hand is always referring to the lower number unless it's 12 and 1. So this is a telling time game that you can play online on the computer, and it's pretty much just like the practice problems we did, but online, and it's a lot more fun. So this next activity, we are going to tell what we are doing, indicated by what time it is on the clock. So there's a couple things we need to know first. Now, a lot of you may think that the next day starts when you wake up in the morning, but it actually starts at midnight. And midnight means that it is 12 o'clock a.m. And what does a.m. mean? So when we're telling time, we either say that it's something a.m. or something p.m. A.m. means morning or late at night. P.m. means evening or the afternoon. So the clocks in our pictures don't tell us if it's a.m. or p.m., so I'm just going to pick one, okay? So for the first one, this is an analog clock, as we learned earlier, and this clock says that it is 6 o'clock, and let's say p.m. So 6 o'clock in the evening. What do you usually do at 6 o'clock at night? Maybe you're eating dinner, or maybe you're watching a movie, doing your homework. So this next clock says that it's 8:30 in the morning. What are you doing at this time on the clock? Maybe you were getting ready for school. Maybe you just woke up. Maybe you're already at school. Maybe you're eating breakfast. Okay? Now, let's look at the next clock. Now, this is a digital clock, so it gives us the time. So it's 12:30. Usually digital clocks will say if it's a.m. or p.m., but I'm just going to choose since this one doesn't. Let's say 12:30 a.m. Now remember, 12 o'clock a.m. equals midnight. So this would mean that it is 12:30 in the morning when you're sleeping. So a new day has already started, but you're still sleeping.